Britain's Deadliest Great Storm, 1987. Hi, hello, and welcome, everyone. I don't want to sound too cheery today because today we are going to watch a video about a disaster that happened in the UK in 1987. And many of you have told me in the comment section about this storm and about it being a really big storm that was a disaster for the whole country. That's why today I do want to find out more about it because I've never heard of it before. I mean, 1987, I was like 5 years old, so I didn't really learn anything about this disaster that happened. But I'd say let's look into this topic and find out what happened that year.
The evening of Thursday, October 15th, 1987, seemed like a perfectly ordinary autumn evening in Great Britain.
Wow.
Millions of people across the country were finishing their dinner, brewing their traditional evening tea, and settling into armchairs in front of their TV sets to catch the BBC News. At 1825, Michael Fish, the nation's most recognizable and trusted weatherman, appeared on the screens. In his classic jacket, with a gentle smile and an utterly calm voice, he uttered words that, a few hours later, would become the death knell of his career and a symbol of the greatest meteorological failure.
What?
Earlier today, he began, a woman rang the BBC and said she'd heard there was a hurricane on the way. Well, if you're watching, don't worry, there isn't. Fish admitted it would be
shoot.
windy, but assured viewers that the main storm fronts would pass much further south, over France and Spain.
They
This
didn't see
phrase
it
lulled an
coming.
entire country into a false sense of security. Britain at that time was a place where faith in scientific progress and state institutions was unshakable. If an expert on the BBC said everything would be fine, it meant one could go to bed in peace.
I mean, yeah, that's what I would think if I saw the weatherman on television telling me that there is nothing to worry about. I would believe him. Why wouldn't you? But there was, like, how did that woman know? Why did she know there was a hurricane coming and the professionals didn't? Like, that's weird, to be honest.
In the suburbs of London, in the quiet villages of Kent and Sussex, people turned out the lights, unaware that they should have been boarding up windows and moving cars away from trees. The shocking truth was that the meteorological office's supercomputers had simply gone blind that day. A rare atmospheric phenomenon, explosive cyclogenesis, had turned an ordinary low-pressure area in the Atlantic into a weather bomb in just a few hours.
Wow.
While the British saw their first dreams, a cyclone of such intensity that these islands had not seen for over 300 years was racing toward the south coast at the speed of an express train. By 10 o'clock in the evening, barometers in coastal towns began to drop with terrifying speed. The needles were literally off the charts. The air grew heavy, portending something horrific. By this time, Michael Fish had long since left work, and the duty meteorologists began to realize the scale of the disaster. But it was already too late.
Too late, yeah.
The information chain was broken. In the era before the internet and mobile phones, warning a sleeping nation was practically
Oh, true.
impossible.
Yeah, true. Nowadays, you could have just sent a message to every single cell phone and warned the people while they were sleeping. Yeah, that's so true. I don't know how bad it was in the end. I guess we'll get to that. But judging by those pictures, for example, or maybe this was a quieter street, the houses still look pretty good. There are some trees that got knocked over, but the houses, like, I am comparing this, for example, to the pictures that we see from the US when there was a hurricane and all the houses are just gone because they're built in a different way. But those brick houses can withstand extreme weather conditions like this one, for example, pretty well, as far as I can judge all of this by that one picture.
Was broken. In the era before the internet and mobile phones, warning a sleeping nation was practically
Mm,
impossible. Fish's error became a fatal point
mm.
of no return. While millions of
And I
people
guess the
slept
trees
peacefully
were
in their
the
beds,
biggest problem.
giant waves were already rising in the English Channel, and the first gusts of wind to reach the Cornish coast began to strip tiles from roofs. The
Mm.
trap had sprung. A night that was supposed to be just windy turned into the beginning of the most terrifying nightmare in modern British history. Around midnight, the quiet pitter-patter of autumn rain was replaced by a sound that no survivor of that night would ever forget. It
Mm.
wasn't the usual whistle of wind in the chimneys. It was a low, visceral roar, resembling the sound of a jet engine taking off right above the roof. The great storm hit the south coast of England with a fury that was never expected. Gusts of wind instantly reached
Okay.
150, and
Yeah, you could see it over here. There is a hole in the roof, so I guess some things really got damaged. But overall, the houses still look pretty good. I mean, yeah, the glass thingy doesn't withstand anything, so yeah, I guess that's broken. And we don't know what they're looking at because they look really shocked. Maybe there's another house completely destroyed, might be the case. I don't know.
gusts of wind instantly reached 150 and then 190 kilometers per hour.
Wow,
In houses across Britain,
190.
people woke up because their beds were literally vibrating. Walls that for
Wow.
decades had seemed like unshakable fortresses began to shudder under the onslaught of an invisible hammer. Those who tried to look out the window saw only pitch darkness,
Mm.
occasionally pierced by bright blue and orange flashes, transformer boxes exploding and power lines snapping, plunging entire
Oh
counties.
wow, look at that picture. If that's real footage from back then. This is more like I expected it to look because this is what we're used to see when we look to the US. I don't know if this is from the UK. I think it is. I think they're only showing footage from the UK though. Wow, that's gone, that house. People lost everything there. I hope they survived.
Exploding and power lines snapping, plunging entire counties into primal chaos. The shocking truth was that modern 80s Britain found itself utterly helpless in the face of the elements. Electricity went out almost
Mm.
instantly, leaving millions trapped inside their own homes. In this sticky darkness, senses were heightened to the limit. People heard their houses screaming under the pressure. Rafters groaned, tiles were ripped from roofs and flew through the air, turning into deadly blades. In upper floor bedrooms, ceilings began to sag, and terrified families, stumbling and feeling their way in the dark, descended to the ground floor, hiding under stairs or heavy dining tables.
Mm.
It was a night of fear, where the only source of information was transistor radios, from which, through the static, came fragmented warnings that the worst was yet to come.
What? Oh my gosh, think about this. You're lying in bed, you're sleeping, and then you wake up all of a sudden because outside there is a really big storm, and you just hear like trees falling over, tiles flying around, or trash flying around, people maybe screaming for help, and the electricity is out, so you don't have light and you probably don't have a candle next to your nightstand, so you're in complete darkness. Outside, you hear all those noises, and then when you reach for the radio and turn it on, they're like, oh, by the way, the worst isn't here yet, so it's only gonna get worse from here. I can't imagine how that must feel in that moment. Those poor people. I myself have never ever witnessed anything like that here in Germany. At least nothing that I can think of. I mean, we do have extreme weather conditions every now and then, or storms or such, but first of all, we always get warned. And second of all, most of the time, stormy conditions are a thing of the north side of Germany, and I have always lived in the south side of Germany, where we have extreme weather conditions in the summer when it comes to hot air, extreme temperature conditions, but storm isn't really a big thing over here. So I have never ever witnessed anything like this before.
But the most terrifying sound of that night was not the roar of the wind, but the crash of falling giants. Across southern England, ancient oaks, beeches, and elms that had survived world wars and dozens of ordinary storms gave up one by one.
Wow.
The moist soil after the rains could not hold the roots, and the thick October foliage acted like a sail, ripping the trees from the ground by their roots. People heard deafening cracks like cannon shots. This was the sound of tree trunks snapping, which the wind then crushed. Trees fell onto house roofs, smashing through floors down to the very foundation, crushed parked cars and blocked roads, turning cozy suburbs into impenetrable jungles of debris. That night, nature cancelled all the achievements of civilization, reminding every Briton that in a battle with the elements, man is but a temporary guest.
Yeah,
As
that's
the
something
storm
we
reached its
tend to
peak,
forget.
Britain began to lose its most precious treasure, its landscape. In just a few hours, nature destroyed what had taken centuries to create. Around 15 million trees were uprooted or turned into splinters.
15 million.
This wasn't just a weather anomaly. It was an ecological slaughter. The
I
most
mean,
tragic symbol
look at that tree. This is not a small tree that has grown for like 2 to 3 years or even 10. Wow. The roots of this tree are massive. You can only imagine what force it must have taken to take down this tree.
of that night was the town of Sevenoaks in Kent, whose name literally means 7 oaks. These oaks were planted back in the early Middle Ages and had survived countless kings and wars. By the morning of October 16th, 6 of the 7 giants lay on the ground, wrenched out with roots the size of a small house. The town, whose identity was inextricably linked to these trees, became different overnight. The shocking truth was that the trees were doomed due to a fatal coincidence of circumstances. October 1987 had been unusually warm and wet. The soil was oversaturated with water, becoming soft and yielding like a sponge. But most importantly, the trees still had their thick, lush foliage, which hadn't had time to fall. When winds of 120 knots struck, the tree canopies acted like massive sails. The ancient oaks and beeches, whose windage was at its maximum, simply stood no chance. The wind didn't just break branches, it twisted trunks out of the earth, lifting tons of soil along with the roots into the air. In the famous Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, over 1,000 rare specimens died, some of which had been brought to Britain by the first ocean explorers. That night forever changed the face of the English countryside. Forests that had served as homes for generations of birds and animals turned into piles of dead wood. Historic parks and gardens, meticulously tended estates, and wild oak groves looked as if a giant steamroller had passed over them. For many Britons, it was a personal loss. People wept looking at the fallen trees in their gardens, under which they had played as children.
I can't imagine, yeah.
It wasn't just a loss of timber, it was a loss of connection to the
Identity.
past. Britain lost its green guardians, and the realization of the scale of this loss only came at dawn, when the elements finally began to subside,
Look at that.
leaving behind an empty, crippled, and unrecognizable horizon. When the first rays of the pale October
I can't
sun
imagine how long
broke
it took
through the
them
ragged
to
clouds
rebuild
on the morning
everything
of
and
October 16th,
tidy up
Britons were
that
faced with a
place.
scene that many would later describe as a war zone without a single shot fired. The storm had moved north, leaving behind a deafening, unnatural silence.
The boats.
Those who dared to step out onto their doorsteps froze in shock. Streets that had been cozy and predictable just yesterday had turned into a labyrinth of brick debris,
Wow.
chunks of slate, and tangled wires. Trees lying across the roads had blocked entire residential areas, turning them into isolated islands. Britain woke up in a world where the usual rhythm of life had been completely
That one
annulled by the
weatherman,
power of nature.
he said it
The
would
shocking truth of that morning was the
just be a
total
little wind.
paralysis of all
Nothing too
infrastructure
bad.
in the south of England. Rail services practically ceased to
The
exist.
shops are destroyed.
Hundreds of trees had fallen onto the tracks, and power lines were torn in so many places that it would take weeks to restore them. For the first time since World War II, the London Stock Exchange was forced to suspend operations, not because of an economic crash, but because brokers simply couldn't reach their offices. Thousands of schools were closed, and roads turned into scrapyards of crushed cars and overturned trucks. Britain, which prided itself on its organization, suddenly became a country where the primary means of transport was once again one's own feet, and the only way to communicate was through face-to-face talk with neighbors over the debris.
No internet.
That morning,
no cell
the
phones.
nation demonstrated its famous stiff upper lip. People took to the streets with thermoses of tea and saws, beginning to clear paths on their own. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to each other for years now worked shoulder to shoulder, dragging away branches
brings people
and
together.
helping those whose roofs had been caved in. The air was thick with the scent of fresh sap and wet earth, but behind this industriousness lay a deep sense of bewilderment. The sight of uprooted giant oaks, which had seemed eternal, filled people with a strange existential fear. It was a morning of great humility, the realization that everything we build and consider unshakable can be destroyed in just one dark, windy night. Once the last fallen trunk had been sawn
we humans
and
were
house roofs
nothing
were
against
tiled
nature.
once more, Britain realized it would never be the same again. The Great Storm of 1987 left behind not just 15 million dead trees, but deep scars in the national psyche. That night became a point of no return for British meteorology. The humiliating failure of the forecast led to a complete restructuring of the Met Office.
I can imagine,
Millions of pounds were invested in new supercomputers and satellite monitoring systems, and public warning protocols became strict and uncompromising. Michael Fish, despite his error, remained on television, but his name forever became a synonym for deceptive calm in the face of disaster. The shocking truth of this legacy lay in how nature began to heal its own wounds. At first, ecologists were horrified, but decades later, something astonishing was discovered. The mass death of old trees gave a chance to younger forests. Light flooding onto the forest floor through the newly created clearings awakened seeds that had been dormant for decades. In place of the fallen giants, new, more diverse ecosystems emerged.
Oh wow, really?
Britain learned a lesson. Nature possesses incredible self-healing power if left alone.
It does.
However, for the people who lived through that night, the storm didn't end at sunrise. For an entire generation, the sound of howling wind outside or the rattling of window frames turned into a trigger, instantly transporting them back to that October darkness. Today, decades later, the Great Storm of 1987 remains a legend passed down through generations. We remember not only the destruction, but also the incredible solidarity that united the nation on the morning after the apocalypse. It was the night Britain lost its trees, but rediscovered its resilience and humanity. The country's forest map changed forever, and those few surviving giant oaks stand today as living monuments to our vulnerability. The lesson of 1987 is simple and harsh. We can surround ourselves with technology and comfort, but the final word always belongs to the elements.
Yeah,
And when the
that's so
wind
true.
begins to pick up strength again, Britain no longer switches the channel. It listens to the sky.
Wow. Thank you to Yesterday's Britain for this video. It was really cool to listen to. But I do want to see if I can find like a news thing that, because I still don't know if people really died in the storm or what else has happened. So I'm gonna try and find a news. Oh, so I found this one. I think this is yeah, it says it over here, Michael Fish, this is the weatherman. Is this the video where he tells people that it's not gonna be that bad?
Earlier on today, apparently, a woman rang the BBC and said she heard that there was a hurricane on the way. Well, if you're watching, don't worry, there isn't.
Don't worry, there isn't. Oh no, couldn't have been more wrong. Oh, I don't know about the music though. Maybe it's copyrighted. Okay, so I found a news report. Maybe they will tell us whether people died or what actually, like how much damage there was for houses and stuff.
There's not been a storm like this in the South Coast counties for as long as anyone can remember. Certainly the scale of the devastation hasn't been experienced since the Second World War. Houses and blocks of flats had their roofs torn away. People were rescued by firemen from buildings in danger of collapse. 2 firemen were killed answering an emergency call in Dorset when a tree fell on their cab.
Shoot.
2 Sussex policemen were lucky to escape when their patrol car was hit by a falling tree. This pile of flotsam is all that's left of the famous Shanklin Pier on the Isle of Wight. It had withstood channel storms for nearly a century, but last night gave up the struggle. It's the end of the pier. The owners say it wasn't insured and nobody could possibly afford to replace it. All along the south coast, there's been wholesale damage to yachts and boatyards.
The hurricane-force winds which lashed the capital in the early hours of the morning were the worst ever recorded, up to 107 miles an hour. The West End took a battering. Some department stores had their shop fronts blown out. By dawn, the winds had died down, but the damage remained. Many roads were blocked by fallen trees. Commuters were advised to stay at home. Those who didn't had to find their own way around or through obstacles.
If you had to go to work.
The London Fire Brigade was inundated with a record number of emergency calls.
I can't imagine.
In North London, firemen rescued a woman after a chimney collapsed. She fell through every floor of the 3-story house, but wasn't seriously hurt.
Oh my god.
Large areas of London and the southeast had power cuts. Overhead, electricity lines were blown down, forcing generating stations to be switched out of the national grid to prevent an overload. The power failures and the fact that so few city workers made it to work meant that there were almost no deals struck on either the stock exchange or the money markets. Most dealers took the opportunity to go for an early and a long lunch.
If there were any shops providing them with the lunch.
Down in the Thames estuary, a crane was blown onto its side at the port of Sheerness. Troops were called in to help clear up at a devastated caravan site on the south coast.
Look at that. Yeah, that's a picture
A
that
sealing ferry was
we
blown
have
aground
seen
near
in the other
Folkestone.
video.
All 20 members of the crew are safe. There were no passengers on board. And further along the south coast, a graphic example of the power of the storm. A Sussex woodland, flattened by the wind.
Wow.
At the Suffolk port of Felixstowe, the tanker the Silver Falcon was torn from its berth in a Force 11 gale, swept out into the harbour after first smashing into a jetty. The docks were evacuated in case of an explosion. Eventually a tug was able to tow the tanker into Ipswich. At Harwich, the Home Office detention ship, the ferry Earl William, was also out of control in the Stour estuary. Tamil refugees on board had a frightening time as the ship temporarily ran aground before finding a firm anchorage.
I can
At
imagine
Jaywick,
that.
100 caravans
Like, oh, it's almost overlaid.
were wrecked. Campers were evacuated to a nearby school, damage put at more than £250,000. The camp's amusement arcade reduced to a pile of rubble. On the main roads this morning, drivers weaved their way around fallen.
Okay. Wow. What's this? Remembering the big freeze of 1963? Oh, maybe I gotta watch this as well. The UK want to change your YouTube homepage? What? What's this all about? Oh no. Let's stay on topic. So, mostly affected were the trees, which is very unfortunate. Some houses, boats, but it seems as if not many people have lost their life, which seems like a miracle for what has happened. Probably because most of them were in the house sleeping and not outside. I guess this would have been an even bigger disaster if it happened during a day where people were mostly outside, like a warm summer day, and then all of a sudden there's this hurricane. And also this weatherman, he still remained a weatherman. Wow. I mean, I don't even know how that works on television. Is he the only one responsible? Like, does he do the research and also do the forecast? Or is he just the forecast man, but he gets his research from other people and he just tells it on TV? How does that work? I don't have no idea. But he did like talk about this woman that called and warned like it was nothing. It's like, yeah, that was a woman who said that, but actually that's not true at all. You don't have to worry about anything. And then all of a sudden all of this happens. Why didn't you at least look into it before you went on television? You could have just like asked other weather people that you do know. Maybe somebody has heard something. Maybe just take it serious. Or maybe if you don't believe that woman, just say, yeah, she called and we don't see anything that points towards this. And also explain to the people who that woman was. Like, is she a reliable source? Is she trustworthy or not trustworthy? I think he didn't think she was trustworthy, but at least tell the people, like, there could be something. Not that there isn't anything, but there could be, but we don't think so. You could have said anything like that, but you just straight out lied and told people there is nothing. That's really bad. Like, he didn't lie. He didn't believe it. Okay, so we know about this flood now. 1987, nothing like that has happened ever since, and we just hope it'll stay that way. I have read comments that people are saying that there are many floods in the UK, but not that bad as this storm was back then. So, like the other video said, knock on wood or touch wood, that nothing bad like this happens. I mean, it probably will, or at least that people are going to be warned next time. And they bought all those supercomputers, so they probably will. Because if you do know what's coming, you can at least prepare for it. If you have lived through this, tell me in the comments. Did you wake up in the middle of the night? What did you think when you woke up? Did you have electricity? What did you do? Just tell me your stories, because if you learn from the people who went through this, it's even more intense. And I do want to know how all of this influenced you. And did you get flashbacks when the wind rushed like a few years later? Did you, like he said, it was a trigger for many people. How was it? And how is it for you nowadays? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll see you in the next video. Have a nice day. Bye.